Mr. Buchanan, the Republican National Convention of 2020 opened up with the poster child of the globalist and interventionist wing of the Republican Party, Nikki Haley, and then proceeded to venerate Tim Scott, who bent his knee to the Black Lives Matter agenda. It ended with President Trump promising law and order and an end to endless wars. How are these two things possible?
Well, I mean, the Republican Party, because it is the Republican Party, and they wanted to feature, I think, all of their stars, and the two you mentioned are, I guess, their stars. But with regard to moving out of these endless wars, I think the president has made something of a beginning, but he hasn't completed the job that he told us he would do. And I would certainly hope that in a second term, he would extricate us from these endless wars in the Middle East. But I will say the only possibility we have of getting out of them is by electing Donald Trump and not electing Joe Biden.
Sure. President Trump, of course, campaigned in 2016 on an America First platform, of which you are the godfather. On his eve of his convention speech, he threw an angel mom under the bus who had been attacked by left-wing open borders media. And he threw crumbs out in his speech, giving a nod to the Border Patrol and to the TVA employees who were nearly replaced by H-1B foreign workers. Is that enough? Are these crumbs enough to persuade voters who voted for an America First agenda to vote for him again?
Well, the whole America First foreign and economic policy, which I championed back in the 1990s, it was get control of the border, stop illegal immigration, put an end to these massive trade deficits. The Chinese were ripping us off, and the Republicans were conspiring or colluding with the Chinese. And also, you had mass illegal immigration coming across the border. Now, the president, again, has made some progress on these. He's made progress on the wall, and his inclinations are in that direction. And we have a choice between the good and the perfect, and we don't have a perfect situation. But again, if you look at it, in the choice between Biden and Trump, it seems to me you have to again go with the president of the United States. To go with Biden is to cancel out all of the policies which we've recommended and on which we've had some partial progress. But is the job done? No, I don't think it's done yet, and I do agree that you have to keep pushing and prodding the President of the United States to do what he promised to do.
You've been covering Beltway politics and Republican politics now for decades. Is it possible to change the calculus of the swamp overtaking the president's good and basic instincts here? And, I'm just going to take it as a given, of course, that anyone who voted for America First certainly is going to know that these are the two choices. And once again, we're left to put a clothespin on our nose in some sense because Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, Chad Wolf, who has now been formally named to take over the Department of Homeland Security, somebody who was an Indian outsourcing lobbyist before he took that position. The old cliche that personnel is policy. And if Donald Trump is reelected, will the personnel undermine once again, I think, even in a more grand way, the platform that he was elected on?
Well, let me say again, I've worked for three presidents, Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan. And I supported Reagan, I supported Goldwater, I supported Nixon. And Nixon was aware, and Reagan was certainly aware that there is what we call a deep state and what they call the permanent government. Donald Trump got 4% of the vote in Washington, D.C., where most of the bureaucrats and almost all of the bureaucrats live. And the areas around D.C. and Montgomery County and Arlington County and Alexandria and Fairfax are overwhelmingly Democrat. And these are the people who people the government of the United States. Now, the key thing is, of course, to bring in your own people, at least at the top levels, and work and work and work over a matter of basically of years so you can get to where you steer the ship entirely. And Trump has not reached that point, and he has picked, with regard to foreign policy, some people who are far more interventionist than I am, and I think other people who are responsible for some of the policies that have produced the disasters, including the Iraq War. Now, again, I mean, we get down to the point where you ask yourself, what is the alternative, and is it possible or is it impossible to change the direction of government? I think there is a possibility of doing it. I've rarely been more hopeful than I was when Donald Trump began. I think he's done some good things in terms of securing the border. He's done some good things in terms of foreign policy. I think some of the things he's been frustrated on, others he maybe has not pushed enough. But again, this is, given the situation, are you going to get a perfect presidential candidate who turns this situation around entirely? I really wonder, Michelle, because we've gone through a cultural war, and to be honest, the war that I identified in that speech of mine in 1992, we've been consistently losing it on the moral and cultural and social issues, largely because of the Supreme Court. But again, I think you come down to the point of a binary election, and you come down to the point of, do you continue battling or do you give up?
Right, and you haven't given up after all of these years. How do you feel about the prospects of the future of the Republican Party, particularly if you look at the types of speakers who were highlighted? And I'm not namely thinking of somebody like Dan Crenshaw, who represents the Bush, Romney, Haley wing of the Republican Party, celebrated, and in large part, admired by the base of the Republican Party, even though he represents the opposite agenda of President Trump. How do you fix that?
Donald Trump was elected based on the issues, as well as his persona, as well as the fact he was an outsider and he offered something different, and the Republican Party and the conservatives desperately wanted change. I don't believe that a candidate who runs for the nomination, let's say in 2024, is going to be able to go back to free trade, globalism, or interventionism, or things like that, because the Republican Party has been changed and reoriented to a great degree by Donald Trump. So I think that's what controls it. The Republicans today, many of them are, as you say, they are. They are basically establishment Republicans, conservative Inc., and all the rest of it, and they may not believe what they are mouthing. But the fact that they are required to speak in a certain way and address these issues indicates a realization on their part that intellectually they have lost the battle for the party's issues and the party's identity. And frankly, if someone came in and attempted to impose free trade and open borders on the Republican Party, he would not be nominated by the GOP.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right. There have to be some sort of cultural or ideological or social impositions of penalties for saying the right things and then doing the opposite. And yet, this week at the convention, we had so many elected Republicans and Trump campaign officials and Don Trump Jr. himself adopting the BLM propaganda and lies about, in Donald Trump Jr.'s case, the George Floyd situation, condemning it as unequivocally a moral disgrace. So clearly, these people have made a cost-benefit calculation, and the benefits of kneeling to the mob outweigh the costs. Do you agree with that?
There's no question about it that there are very few people, and even fewer in positions of power and prominence, who are going to go against the cultural trend and the cultural demands and the cultural conclusions about what things have happened, what is happening. But again, Michelle, this is really the real world I've been living with since I supported the great Barry Goldwater in 1964 and Richard Nixon in 1960 and again in 68, that I've worked in these White Houses, and you lost many, many battles, but you won some, like on the Vietnam War, you won some, on the Great Silent Majority, on
Yes.
going to war against the major national media, a war that's continuing today and intensifying. So in all of these, I mean, is there some final conclusive victory this side of the grave? I'm not sure there is. I mean, we may disagree a bit on how well we're doing, but I don't think we do too much. And I think you got to ask yourself, what are the options and what are the alternatives? And for me, they're to keep on battling as long as you can.
Yes. Last question for you. There's a juxtaposition of two images, and one is of President Trump promising law and order, and the other is of the scene on the streets in the District of Columbia right after his speech and the event had ended, with Rand Paul and his wife being mobbed, many ordinary Trump supporters who had turned out for this lovely event that ended with fireworks, then being confronted by this mob and being held defenseless. This is happening all over the country. You've seen it before. You talked to the federal troops who had been sent in to quell the violence in LA in 1992. You referenced it very famously and historically in your 1992 speech. Is enough being done to stop it? And do you agree with the 4D chess strategists who believe that it's better to allow this chaos to continue to happen because it benefits the Republican Party?
No, I don't think it's right to let the chaos happen. Or what happened there with Rand Paul was disgusting and outrageous. And the only benefit to come out of it is if the American people could see that, the film of that, and see it. And I think they are seeing it in Kenosha and Portland and places like that more and more. And the mood of the country is changing dramatically. So I think that is one of the hopes. I will say the image of that young woman who simply refused to raise her fist in a Black Power salute and declare Black Lives Matter when she was in that restaurant with those basically aspiring brown shirts, harassing her, berating her, getting in her face, threatening her. I think that film caused even some of the Biden Democrats and others, once it was shown, to denounce it. I do think that the showing of these films of what's going on in these cities, in Portland and Seattle and Minneapolis and places like that, is turning the country 100% against, I think, or maybe not 100%, but turning the country in a large degree against this whole exercise that's going on. So I think, and that's one of the hopes, frankly, for the reelection of Donald Trump, is that Joe Biden was forced to come out yesterday and denounce the violence, the looting, the arson, which the Democrats did not do at their basic convention. So I think the tide is shifting somewhat. The key is about 60 days now, Michelle. I think the only alternative is the election of Donald Trump, and then we're going to have to work, if and when that occurs, we'll have to work with what we have and who we have.
I think that sums it up so well. It is a perpetual battle, and you've been a warrior for America and America first. You're our spirit animal, and I appreciate the time that you've given us. Thank you for joining Sovereign Nation, Pat Buchanan.
Good luck, Michelle.
Thank you.
Newsmax TV is now America's fastest growing cable news channel. We give you the real news you need. So subscribe to our YouTube channel and give us a thumbs up. If you like this video, share it with your friends. Newsmax TV streams live on YouTube for free. Newsmax TV, real news for real people.